Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ARC of Massachusetts webinar series. If you've joined us in the past, you'll note that this is a new webinar format for us. We're now using Zoom and believe this is going to be a much easier platform to navigate. My name is Carrie Mahoney, and I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. Here's some areas to note. We've muted you upon entry, and that's so we can eliminate background noise because all sessions are recorded, and we find that it's a better quality audio when we do mute people. So you'll be able to view this session as a recording, and it will be listed on the ARC of Massachusetts YouTube channel. And that will take us probably about a week or so to make sure it's up there. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat pane located at the bottom of your screen. So I'm hoping that you can all chat into me right now just to make sure you can hear me. And it would be great if you could let us know, are you a parent, are you a professional, or are you a self-advocate who's attending this session? We typically will save questions for the last 15 minutes of the webinar presentation, and that's to make sure that the presenter can get through all her material. And you'll also receive a copy of this webinar. So that will happen right after the session. Okay, so let me just check the chat pane to see who's on. Oh, hi, Alyssa. Oh, good that the United Arc in Greenfield, Mass is with us. All right, terrific. So at this point, I want to introduce our speaker today. Her name is Marlene Sallo, and Marlene is the Executive Director of the Disability Law Center. And Marlene's going to tell you a little bit more about REV UP and why it's so important. So I hope you enjoy this webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to oversee this webinar today and to provide you some information. REV UP is a campaign that actually coordinates the National Disability Voter Registration Week, which today is the beginning of this week. And what we do at REV UP is we make a concerted effort to ensure that people with disabilities are registered to vote, are educated about this year's election, and can also prepare to cast a ballot in November. So there's going to be a lot of activities throughout the state this week, as well as events, not only in Massachusetts, but across the country. And our goal is to help to garner attention from not only the media, but the candidates as well, about the electorate of people with disabilities and the issues that are important to everyone in the disability community. Just a little fact. The disability community has the potential to actually become a powerful voting bloc. There are approximately 34.4 million eligible voters with disabilities just in 2016 alone. And if we include family members in the same household, that number actually jumps to 62.7 million eligible voters, which is about 25% of the total electorate. So what does this mean for us? It means that if we get out and vote, we can protect the issues people with disabilities care about, like the American with Disabilities Act, Medicaid, accessible transportation, affordable accessible housing, to name a few, not only at the state, but at the local level. And most importantly, a politically engaged disability community can make elected officials think twice before they infringe on our rights, access, and choice to live in the community. So that said, we'll get started with our webinar today. And always remember that your vote does count. It always counts. So please go out and vote. So as I indicated in my opening, July 16th through the 20th is the National Disability Voter Registration Week. And when we talk about voting, what we need to keep in mind is that it's your right to vote. You have a voice, and this is your opportunity to create change. So we recently met with Congressman Joe Kennedy, and these are some of the quotes during the interview. So the first quote is, "Voting is a way for our elected officials to know what their constituents want and what our country wants. And the way to make your voice heard is by your vote. And it's important to vote because it's how we, as a nation, impact the laws that structure our society. But most importantly, voting is the most basic, fundamental right that American citizens have. And it's so incredibly important that people exercise it. Now, when we speak about voting, we know that there's a primary election as well as a general election. And the primary election is up and coming. It'll take place on Tuesday, September 4th. And during the primary, what we do is we choose the candidates that will represent their political party in the general election. And the general election is actually coming up on November 6th in Massachusetts, which is also a Tuesday. And it's a regular election for statewide or national offices. So these are some important dates that we'd like for everyone to keep in mind. Wednesday, August 15th is actually the deadline for you to register to be able to vote in the Massachusetts primary election. And as we previously indicated, Tuesday, September 4th is the actual Massachusetts primary election. And then on Wednesday, October 17th is the registration deadline for the Massachusetts general election, which is currently scheduled to take place on Tuesday, November 6th. Now, who can vote? You may vote in Massachusetts if you are a citizen of the United States, you are 18 years old and older, and you are not currently incarcerated by reason of a felony conviction. So if you meet the above requirements, you can apply online, by mail, or in person in order to register to vote. So one of the questions that we hear is sometimes people will ask, are people with disabilities allowed to vote? And the answer is an absolute resounding yes, because voting is a fundamental right of all American citizens. So according to our elections division, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Massachusetts residents who are under guardianship are still eligible to register and vote under most circumstances. So unless a court specifically states that the person under guardianship is restricted from registering or voting, that person remains eligible to vote as long as they meet all the other requirements for voting. And those requirements would be the three that I previously mentioned. So why is it important for you to know your rights? Well, it's very important because you want to be able to exercise this right without any restrictions whatsoever. So as a voter with a disability, you have the right to vote privately and independently, and to have an accessible polling place with voting machines for voters with disabilities. So what does this mean for you? You can either seek assistance from the workers at the polling place who have been trained to use the accessible voting machines, or you can bring someone to help you vote. So what can you do? You can request your local election officials to tell you about any voting aids, voting assistance, and absentee ballot procedures that are available. Now, when you're there, how do you get help with voting? If you need help voting because of a disability, you have the right to get help from almost any person you choose, whether it's a family member, a friend, a supporter, or a poll worker. There are only two kinds of individuals that can't help you vote, and that is your boss, well, really three, right? Your boss or someone working for your boss, or if you belong to a labor union, an officer or agent of that labor union. So, or even the poll worker themselves, right? They can't explain, they're there to assist you, but those are the three folks specifically that can't help you vote. So anyone helping you vote must respect your choices, and they cannot assume whether they know who you want to vote for or what you want to vote for. So they have to respect whatever it is you choose to do and whom to vote for. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is when someone is helping you vote, whoever is helping you must respect your privacy at all times. Also, if you have a hard time reading the ballot, you may ask for a voting machine that reads aloud the choices on the ballot, and you can ask a helper to read out loud all the names on the ballot. If you have a hard time marking the ballot by yourself, you can also tell the helper which person you want to vote for. Now, what can you expect from the officials when you vote? Election officials must help you vote if you ask for their help. Okay, so what are they supposed to do? They must ensure that you can use all of their voting booths, ballots, or other voting forms, the voting machines, and any other voting equipment. In addition, service providers and election officials must make reasonable changes to their policies in order to help you vote. Now, the National Voter Registration Act says that all disability service agencies are considered voter registration agencies. They must give you voter registration forms if you ask for them. They must also help you fill them out, and they must send the form to the appropriate agency for processing. So now we know that you have the right to vote and what you can ask for at the voting place, but you also have to have an accessible polling place. So accessible voting provides the same opportunity for access and for participation to persons with disabilities as it compares to other voters. So all polling places in Massachusetts must provide access on a permanent or a temporary basis on election day, whether that's the primary or the national election day. Voting assistance and absentee voting offer options that persons with disabilities may use to vote, but they're not considered substitutes for actual accessibility to the voting location. So one of the things that you'll find at the polling places are accessible voting equipment, and your polling place must be equipped so that voters with disabilities can use this equipment in order to allow voters to have the same opportunity to vote privately and independently. And every precinct must have at least one accessible voting machine available. So this machine is called the AutoMark. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, the AutoMark is a marking device that uses audio cue capacity for visually impaired voters. It also has a feature that greatly magnifies the ballot or displays the ballot high contrast for voters that have limited visual impairment. And it can also produce an oral report to the voter of the choices selected prior to the voter printing the ballot. Now, if you find that you have accessibility complaints, the Election Division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Mass is committed to make sure that voting is accessible for all your voters. And you can reach them by calling 1-800-462-VOTE or 1-800-462-8683, or you can call them at 617-727-2828. You can also contact them at elections at, which is that A, sec.state.ma.us. Now, when you go out to vote, sometimes people will ask, is identification required? So if you're a first-time voter, or if you've been an inactive voter for a while, you may be asked to show identification. And so on this webinar, we have pictures of two licenses. The first license, which is on the left, is actually the license that's the new ID that's going to be effective for everyone starting in 2020. And then the second license picture on the right-hand side is the general Massachusetts identification card. Either way that you look at it, whether it's a driver's license or a Massachusetts identification card, both cards have your picture, and they have your date of birth and your address, and when the ID was issued for you. So acceptable identification must include your name and the address at which you're registered to vote. So as I indicated, it could be a driver's license, it could be a state-issued ID card, a recent utility bill, rent receipt, lease, a copy of a voter registration affidavit, or any other printed identification that contains the voter's name and the voter's address. Now, how do you register to vote if you're not already registered? Well, one of the things you can do is you can actually register online. In order to register online, you must have a signature on file with the Registry of Motor Vehicles. If you currently have a Massachusetts driver's license or even a state ID card, you may use the online voter registration application to register. But you can also use this online service to update your address and even to change your party affiliation. And your voter registration forms must be submitted online by midnight on the date of the voter registration deadline, which we provided at the beginning of the webinar. And how to access this online registration website, you go to HT as in Tom, T as in Tom, P as in Paul, S / www period S as in Sam, E, C as in cat, period, state, STATE, period, MA, period, US as in Sam, US, / O, V as in Victor, R, /. Now, not only can you register to vote online, but you can also do so by mail. So if you don't qualify to register online, or if you would prefer to register by mail, you may download the voter registration form, which is available on the Elections Division webpage. The form must be completed, signed, and delivered to your local election official. And the voter registration form submitted by mail must be postmarked no later than the voter registration deadline, which we provided at the beginning. And at the bottom of this slide is the actual address, and it's at HTTP as in Paul, S as in Sam, / www.sec.state.ma.us /ELE /ELEI F as in Frank, V as in Victor /HOWREG.HTM. So on slide number 19, there's actually a sample voter registration form, and this voter registration form pretty much lays out what the requirements are when filling out the form. It'll ask you whether you're a citizen, your full name, any former names you may have, the address where you live now, the address where you receive your mail, date of birth, ID number, which could either be your license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. You have the option of listing your phone number. You have the party enrollment or designation, so you would pick which party you belong to, whether you belong to a party or not, address at which you were last registered to vote, and then it provides the opportunity, if you're unable to sign the form, to give the name, address, and telephone number of the person that's actually helping you fill out the form. Then you attest to the fact that you are a U.S. citizen with the date and the signature. So you may also, not only can you register to vote online, but also do it by mail, you may also register to vote in person. And you can do this by going to any local election office, as well as going to the Elections Division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth office. And this office is located at 1 Ashburton Place, number 1705 in Boston, Mass. And voter registration is also available as part of every transaction at the Registry of Motor Vehicles, as well as certain public assistance agencies. For example, I relocated to Massachusetts 4 months ago, and when I went to register my vehicle and get my Massachusetts driver's license, they automatically asked me if I wanted to register to vote. And so it was extremely easy for me to register, and I already have my registration confirmation. Now, voter registration forms have to be completed that are completed in person are valid as of the day that they are signed. Now, many folks will ask, such as myself, right, since I'm new to the state, how do I find out where to vote? And you can do so by going online and entering your address, whether it's in a city or town within Massachusetts, to get that information. If you also if you live in a village, there's actually a link online where you can view a list of village names to find the city or the town name for your village. And then you can input that information in order to figure out where your polling place is. And the address for that is http://www.sec.ma.us/where do I vote mass MA, where do I vote MA all together, /B as in boy AL /my election info all together .A S as in Sam, P as in Paul, X as in X-ray. Now on slide 22, we have a sample ballot as well as a sample ballot initiative question. And these sample ballots are actually also live on the Secretary of State Galvin's website, where in the section for voting. So there are many different sample ballots that anyone can access online to see what a ballot looks like and to also read how a ballot initiative question may be set up on the actual voting ballot. Now, sometimes we are unable to participate physically on the day of the election. And so we have the ability to request an absentee ballot. And on slide 23, we actually have a picture of a sample absentee ballot. And in order to be eligible to vote by absentee ballot in Massachusetts, a voter must be prevented from voting at their polling place on election day due to one of three things. You're absent from the city or town on election day. You have a physical disability that impedes your ability to go to the polling site, or it's based on a religious belief. So in order to be able to vote, if you meet one of those three criteria, then you can request an absentee ballot. You can also download it off the website, and you can then submit it and vote via mail. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. I hope that you found it informative. So if you give us just a second, we do have our contact information on this last slide. So my office email address is there, as well as Julie Heffernan's contact information as well, and Katerina Daly.
Okay, well, thank you, Marlene, for a great webinar, and I was so impressed with the numbers of how impactful that we can all be. So I just wondered if anybody has questions, you can chat them into us, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. We'll just wait a couple seconds. All right then. So anyways, as I said, this will also be recorded on our ARC of Massachusetts webinar on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check it out. After this webinar, you will be rerouted to a very brief, I promise, 5-question survey just to see how we did. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you do it in the future. And thank you for your comment, Alyssa. It was a great training. She appreciates it. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.